presenting last year. Thank you very much for coming back for seconds. It's lovely. I will admit last year was one of my first experiences presenting online, so I was extremely nervous. I have no such excuses this year, and I'm still extremely nervous. So without further ado, let's move on to the presenting area. Okay. I'm going to start with a polling pod because I think they're kind of fun. So there is a reason why I'm asking this question. Which of these best describes your background? I'd kind of like to get a feel for what kind of people we've got in the audience. Admittedly, this is the second time I've run this presentation, and the first time we had quite a few multitasking champions of the universe. So if you do feel like you're a marathon all-rounder, feel free to make the appropriate selection. The results are being broadcast, so we'll all get to see kind of what makeup we've got in the audience. And as I said at the start, we've got a fairly intimate group this evening, which is rather nice. I get a little bit intimidated when it gets over 6 or 7 people, I must admit. Not many choices. JF, if you've got any suggestions, I'm more than happy to put them in there. This was very basic, broad choices. And good Tuesday evening to Kathleen from Sydney. I know you're over in Canada. We're finishing up the day over here in Sydney, Australia. Well, JF, let's switch to a different poll then. So I've broadcast the results from this one. We've got a fair percentage of all-rounders, one multitasking champion of the universe. I have a hunch I know who that is. I'm going to view votes and see if my hunch is correct. Surprised. Not quite who I thought it was. Very good. Very nice, Stephen. I would love to join you for coffee in your garden. It seems a much better alternative to Coke in the iMoot central area of Sydney. All right, so one more poll before I get started. My iMoot skills need a little bit of brushing up. Go. Folks, this presentation is all about reports in Moodle. And likewise, Shane, I'd love to be in Germany too. The session is directed both at understanding what reports are available in Moodle that can help us and how we can use that information. So it's kind of a two-parter. I have a tertiary background, so I'm very keen on researching and finding out concrete evidence for hypotheses. But what I like about this presentation is we look at both quantitative and qualitative methods. So for those of you who aren't familiar with them, quantitative is kind of your statistical analysis. Qualitative is your soft skills and human touch element of things, and they're both really important looking at getting hard evidence of how practice actually benefits your own teaching methods. So there's a poll up there at the moment, poll 4. Which of these reports are you familiar with? I apologise, thank you. I'd overlooked it. There we go, should be open now. Brilliant. Thanks, folks. Sorry, I will admit it is 10 past 10 over here in Sydney, and I got back in from Bhutan yesterday morning, so I'm still trying to wake up a bit, I think. Well, I apologise. Shane, you have no excuse for dad jokes. I agree, Stefan. Shane, why do bosses so rarely trust people? Okay. I might come back to that one, Shane. It's a bit of a loaded question. So it's kind of interesting here. We've got one person who's a self-admitted system administrator and a couple of all-rounders, but we've only got one person who's really keenly familiar with the system-wide reports available in Moodle. And that's kind of what we're hoping to uncover with this next presentation. So I'm going to move along to the presentation area and switch into sharing my screen and get on with the show, folks, but we'll come back to these polls in a little while. Bear with me. My Adobe skills still need a bit of brushing up. But you should be able to see a lovely glossy title in the middle of the screen there now. Okay, Stefan. Clearly I needed to clarify my question a little more. This is what you get for writing the questions about 5 minutes before you do the presentation. Never let it be said I leave things to the last minute. There was at least 10 minutes to spare before I finished that poll. Okay, we're talking about how we influence learning. It's a pretty big thing when we're talking about Moodle. It's something I tend to present on a lot when I'm doing training and consulting. JF Dragon, you're quite right. Many of us are combined roles, Moodle admins, teachers, teaching assistants, students as well. So it was a very blunt-ended instrument, that particular poll. It's more of a feel for the waters. So I do like starting with a bit of a provocative question. What's the right way to teach? And I also like doing that when I'm running training sessions as well, just to get people awake and thinking. And it's a loaded question. It's meant to be. Because I firmly believe there is no right way to teach. There's the way that works for your context. And that context can change depending on who you're working with, what resources you have available, what infrastructure you have available, what your students' learning styles are like. All of those elements that mix in the pot and affect how we teach, what we teach, and what the most effective way of getting it across is. Exactly, Stefan, whichever one works. The problem with that is trying to work out what that is. Yes, Shane, there are definitely some wrong ways to teach. They involve dad jokes. So I'm paying out on Julian and his dad jokes a little bit. But knowing what the best way to teach in our particular context isn't quite as straightforward as it sounds. We assume that when our students are happy, things are going along well, and oftentimes we don't question how we might be able to do things better. Yes, getting as much feedback as possible is awesome. Feedback, if you can get your money back as well, that's kind of cool too. I'm being cheeky. The thing is, we know what good teaching looks like. We see it in classrooms. We know when our students are engaged with what we're presenting with them. We know when they're working with us on learning things. Personally, I'm a big fan of learning objectives too, Stefan. I think they're a great way of being able to point out in your course where your students are picking up and where you may need to do a little more work. But not everyone is a big fan of them, and they do make a bit of extra administrative effort in a Moodle site. I could go off on quite a tangent talking about those actually. They're one of my favourite things. We know it when we do it too. But I suspect, JF Dragon, that we know it when we do it better when we're doing it face to face, because we get that body language feedback which is so immediate and so human that we don't stop to think about it. It's a little harder to see it online because our students are doing their learning asynchronously. We're not always seeing exactly what they're looking at or how long they're spending looking at it. They're not always asking us the questions that may come to mind when they're looking at those resources. So what this presentation is kind of aimed at is how do we see what our students are doing online? And how do we know that what we're doing online is actually good practice or working for us the best way it possibly could? So My simple response to that is reports. And as we saw with that poll, there are quite a few reports to choose from in Moodle. You're not limited in the range of choice. What you are limited in as a teacher is seeing the reports just for your course. So any course that you have access to, you'll be able to see things like the activity completion reports for that course, the logs and the live logs for it, and participation reports as well. It's quite extensive information, but it's only for the courses you're involved with. The other reports that are available in Moodle are available to system administrators. Kind of keen to point out that what we're measuring here is clicks, and clicks doesn't necessarily correlate to engagement, even though we can interpret it that way. So the reports that we're talking about specifically in this particular presentation is the site-wide overview course reports. As you can see in this particular image, they're available via the settings block, so they are a Moodle 2 feature. Under Site Administration, Reports Course Overview, you can see there are quite a few other reports to choose from there as well. I don't talk about those ones at all in this particular presentation. If you have questions about them, you're more than welcome to email me. Site-wide course overview reports, though, come in 4 different flavours. We start with the simplest, the most active courses. And when we're talking about active, all we're referring to here is number of clicks within that course space. Stefan, you've made a comment the Moodle feature is quite complex. Was there one in particular you're referring to? So the first one we're going to look at is most active courses. Then we're going to compare that to the most active courses with a weighted variant on it. Most active courses, like I said, is just the number of clicks within that. Oh, you're quite right, Stefan. Setting up learning objectives can be quite complex. Particularly now when you start considering the impact of rubrics as well as learning objectives. The amount of cross-referencing work in that is fantastic, but it can be a lot of administrative overhead. Sorry, I'm going off at a bit of a tangent there, responding to the chat session. Most active courses, the bar graph that we've got up here is a sample of training courses that I ran a couple of months ago now. So these courses will run over 2 days. All we're looking at is just number of clicks here. These are not real courses. I'm keen to stress that. It's just pretend data that's being demonstrated here. What I do want to draw your attention to, though, in this particular bar graph, we've got WACOL 01 as the top level course. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Down the bottom, we've got our actual number statistics. So for each course, we've got a level of activity. 664 clicks over the period we're looking at, which is 3-week times. Moving right along to most active courses weighted. And again, WACOL 01 is still our top ranked course here. That's okay. If we take a closer look at the numbers, we've still got the same amount of activity, 664 clicks for the top one. But now we've got a figure for activity per user. This is starting to refine those statistics a little bit more. So instead of just having that top score, we can start seeing, well, all of these courses have got 14 users. So now our activity ratio is actually reflective of a really busy course. But if, for example, WACOL 09 had only 20 users in it, you start seeing that you've got maybe a little bit more or a little bit less activity happening per user per course. Useful if you're just trying to get a good overview, a little bit more refined than the active courses report, which you can see in the comparison here. But I still like going a little bit further into this. Folks, if I'm moving too fast or too slow, please let me know through the chat. You'll notice in our most participatory courses now we're looking at 2 different types. This is the enrollments one. And instead of Wakehollow 1 being our top course, Creator is now our top course because we've changed the structure for the report. Changed the ground rules a bit here. Let's have a look at the numbers. Still get a list of courses, still got a list of users, but now we're looking at how many users were active, how many users were getting in there and doing stuff. What we're not seeing here is the number of clicks, which is how this participation ratio is being divvied up. I would love to go into more detail in the maths for this participation ratio, but I will admit it took me 3 days of a long weekend with a PHP programmer sitting beside me trying to understand SQL queries to work out even a basic understanding of how this is being generated, which was quite a bit of frustration. So I'm going to set that aside because it's 10 o'clock at night over here in Sydney. Really not the best time to be trying to break down that maths. My favourite of these reports, though, is the most participatory courses views for posts. Because what we're looking at here is the difference between passive and active activity. Views is just looking at stuff. Opening a document, opening a forum post, opening an activity, but posting stuff is making a change. So submitting an assignment, posting a discussion message or a reply, posting a comment, all those things where they actually have to create some content and put it into Moodle is a post. And it's the same with teachers, incidentally, folks. Posting stuff could be creating an activity as well. I'll come back to that point in just a moment. But what I do want you to notice again is our top course has changed based on the rules that we're using to set up what is the most active course. Now, Wakehollow 1 is actually right down the... Oh, it hasn't even made it to the top 5. Sorry, I'm looking at 11. Instead, Wakehollow 8 is our top course. Let's have a look at the statistics to see a bit more about that. It's got 68 views, but it's got a high number of posts compared to those views. So we're looking at the ratio between active activity to passive activity to evaluate that engagement. And that's why I like this particular report the most. I'm not sure if anyone's picked it yet. There's a flaw across all 4 of these reports. Has anyone picked it? I'm looking at chat to see if anyone's got some ideas around what one of the flaws about this might be. Trying to be patient. As a trainer, I'm practicing learning not to just rush in and fill the silence gap. It's very tricky sometimes. We need a clue. Okay, no one's writing, so I'm assuming everyone's kind of scratching their heads. Oh, no. Stephen's asking for a clue. The frustrating thing about these reports is they're not broken down by user roles. So in trying to get some useful information out of this about whether our students are actively engaged, all we're seeing here is the enrolled users in the course, and an enrolled user can be a student, a teacher, a non-editing teacher, and those are just the default roles in Moodle. If you've been particularly adventurous in setting up your Moodle site, you may have many, many more roles that can be enrolled in the course. Exactly, you could have a really active teacher who's building a course. No students in there at all. It's still very, very busy, very, very active course, which is kind of frustrating really, because this could be a great tool if you could just thread that information out a little bit more. And if I had to ask for a feature request on it, that would be one of my favorites at the moment, is being able to pull some role information out of it. Now, the upside of that is we could go into, for example, at the moment, we could go into Wakehollow 8 and go, okay, is there just an active teacher here, or are the students actually being busy and doing useful stuff in it? And you can look at things like the activity completion reports or the activity reports to see what's happening there. So these course overview reports give you kind of a rule of thumb. They let you track down those users who would otherwise maybe miss your attention. So this is our comparison between those participation statistics. We've got an active users report and a views versus posts report. My preference is the last one. But when I've touched on the roles, I've kind of brought up our next point here is how do we use what we're measuring? Because if we just look at it and go, well, the most active course must be the best because it's really, really active, and the least active course must be the worst, so we'll beat that particular person about the head and body with a stick. That's not the way these reports were meant to be used, folks. Ideally, these reports can help track down which users are struggling and which users are really having fun with using Moodle. Oh dear. What I'm going to do now is diverge slightly from the kind of step-by-step slides here and just retell an anecdote. So I started working with Pukunui around this time last year, actually. And not long after I started, I work with Julian, based in Sydney, who's otherwise known as the Moodle Man. He's been collecting Moodle stories for over 8 years now, and he shared one with me not long after I started about a colleague who's working in a private school, private boys' high school, as an IT manager, recently introduced Moodle and wanted to make sure that it got up and it was working well for all the staff involved. And if any of you have ever tried introducing Moodle or been part of that process, you'll know it can be quite difficult. It can be met with a lot of resistance as people go, well, I've got too much workload to try and learn how to use a new system when my teaching's working just fine the way it is. This IT manager was fairly switched on, had a supervisor who was quite happy to help him out, support him in however he wanted to go. It really does help when your executive are on your side. He tripped over the course overview reports fairly early in using Moodle. And what he found was he could track down the 2 highest courses and the 2 lowest courses. And he invited the people responsible for those courses out to morning tea with him each month for about 6 months running. He went, okay, I know I've just introduced this new system to the school. I know new software can always be a bit of a pain. I'm here to support you. I want to make sure it works. I want to make it better. So I'd be really grateful if you could spare me half an hour and just tell me how it's working for you so I can make sure any little rough patches are fixed up. Note, he's never told them, I've looked at the reports and I've picked you because you're the 2 worst and you because you're the 2 best. There was never any indication to these staff members of how they were brought together. It was just a collegial, I'd really appreciate some of your time. When he sat them down, these 4 staff members started sharing their stories, and as you can imagine, they're radically different. 2 of them are going, well, Moodle's awful. It's hard to use, my students don't like it, my students can't access it, I get confused, I don't understand it, I just don't want to use it, it's too hard. And 2 other staff members going, oh, it's fantastic, I can do this, and I can use forums, and I can put resources up, and I can do quizzes, and all the other wonderful things that we know are in Moodle. And I admit I'm completely biased. There are some just wonderful and fantastic features of Moodle. I could wax lyrical about them for some time. But these 2 differing perspectives are being shared between the staff members, completely unaware that they've been deliberately chosen. And you start getting an exchange of views. Those staff members who are quite reticent to start using Moodle, who are struggling with it, are suddenly seeing that there's more that can be done with it, that their lives could be made easier with it. While our 2 top achievers are realizing that it's not necessarily the Holy Grail. Blasphemy. Of course it's the Holy Grail. You get a meeting in the middle. And facilitating this is the system administrator, who's picking up on the bugs of the system so that they can be fixed and made smoother for everyone, and is picking up on the features that are being really well used throughout the school so they can make sure there's training sessions run for those to help expand that out further. This is definitely an ideal story. And this is where I make a bit of a confession, folks. This presentation is completely selfish. I love sharing information about Moodle, But when I came across this story nearly 12 months ago, I went, well, there's got to be some hard evidence for how well this works. And in 12 months of looking, I haven't found any case studies, any proof, any solid evidence that I can use to persuade, say, your executive management staff that this is a fantastic approach to implementing a Moodle. So this is my very selfish call for those of you who are interested in finding hard evidence and would like to join me for case studies and that sort of thing. I would love to hear from you or any of your colleagues that think might be interested. So we're going to move along, and as we do, we're going to look at how this IT manager used influence strategies to help take that statistical data and make it meaningful. So how do we use what we measure? I've spoken there about influence. This is a book that I strongly recommend to anyone who's trying to make institutional change or even just personal change that lasts. Influencer is a program I came across nearly 2 years ago now. In my work at the University of New England, I had a wonderful colleague who was running the influencer training sessions, and I was very privileged to attend them. The book itself, slight American bias, it can be a little bit heavy, but the case studies it goes through are international flavoured, so there's plenty of stories from around the world and plenty of demonstrations of how the techniques they're talking about work in a variety of settings. We're going to look at a very brief snapshot of those skills right about now, actually. If I can get my cursor to work where I want it to. This is the dread of working across 2 screens, folks. So this is the keystone of the influencer book and program. It talks about 6 different spheres of influence. Our IT manager has intuitively picked up most of these spheres. By making sure that there's a regular meeting with staff involved coming to him and talking about what's working with Moodle, he's touched on making sure the environment supports those staff members so that the change is built into the systems that occur throughout that school. He's also looked at the social elements by making sure that there's peer pressure from both sides to make sure that the change is realistically implemented. So our 2 top achievers are going to be influencing our strugglers, but our strugglers are equally going to be influencing those top achievers to make sure that they're aware of the problems within this system and can help solve them. So they're not just allowed to go off on tangents experimenting with all the wonderful things. They have to be a little bit more grounded. Yes it is. Thank you for that link, Stefan. I will put in some links to the course area to these particular books that I mentioned, and I'll talk more a little bit about the presentation this is based on. But we also need to make sure we look at those personal strengths for each individual within the institution, because if they're struggling, if they don't have either the motivation and or the ability to help this change go along, then it's going to be a little bit rougher for us to get it through. So each of our staff members needs to be both motivated to make that change happen, and in this case, sharing stories between them about how Moodle made life easier is certainly going to add to that motivation. They also need to have the skill set to do it though, because if they have the motivation but none of the skills, they're going to get very frustrated very quickly. And again, bringing them together meant that they could share that knowledge and those skills together. I'm a bit of a fan of influence and change management generally, and I've been looking at it for on and off for probably 3 or 4 years now. Those of you who know me vaguely know that I'm fairly passionate about open education resources, and there's a whole heap of change management that needs to happen there at an international scale to make that movement succeed more widely. Open education resources has now gained a lot of momentum over the last 5 years, but the equivalent momentum for open certification still needs to come along. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But in researching those 2 areas, I came across a diffusion of innovations. Now, Everett Rogers' work has been around for probably close to 30 years now. He's recognised as the father of innovations research. And he talks about different categories of innovators. And he gives some very good stories within this book. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but one of the things that perplexed me about this anecdote when Julian first related it to me was we've got 2 audiences here. We've got strugglers, which Rogers refers to as laggards, and the top-end achievers, which are the experimental people. And if you read Rogers' work, you realise that this should never have worked. you've got experimental people that the bulk of the population generally won't follow because they're too experimental. They want to play with all the new technologies. They're right out on the bleeding edge, and that makes them unsafe to follow. We need the next step between them and the rest of everyone else, which is a trusted social network. These are individuals that people naturally turn to when they're having trouble. So it's the colleague that you walk down the hall to with a coffee in your hand going, look, I heard the printer's messed up this morning. Do you reckon you could help me fix it? Those people who are on the spot and naturally gravitate towards helping those around them. They're fantastic influencer mentors, and they're people we really need to take advantage of when we've got any sort of change movement happening in an organisation. For my money, I'm still trying to understand how we've got these two diverse groups having such a fantastically positive impact. And this is why I'm looking for people who are interested in working on case studies with me to try and prove this theory. Because at the moment, that's all it is. It's a theory. The tools are certainly there. Stefan, does that mean you're the IT help desk for your area? I guess what I'm looking for is proof of this particular theory. We've got some great stories of how it does work and has worked, but none of this is conclusive proof yet. Partially because we don't know the extent of the environments, so we can't replicate it. So what I'm looking for, and what I'll talk on more in a moment, is individuals who are either teaching and are using reports to help inform their teaching practice, or even better, institutions who are using these reports to help inform their change management and Moodle management processes. I encourage you to have a look at Everett Rogers' work, especially if you're trying to implement a Moodle site within your own institution, because it does help to be able to identify those individuals within an organisation who can either champion your change movement or completely kill it, just because they're not trusted by the rest of the population. I think what struck me most about our IT manager story, though, is the build-up of informal networks. This is something we don't focus nearly enough on when we're talking about trying to make a Moodle site work. We have to have that human element. By simply offering a coffee on a regular basis, this individual was able to garner that really essential information about what was happening in the Moodle site at that ground level with their teachers. What I love, oh, pardon me for a moment, folks, I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat. Thank you, Stefan. I do like a nice cup of coffee. It had to be pretty. What we're looking at here is a combination of quantitative and qualitative techniques. By looking at the quantitative reports and seeing what courses were really active, and taking the time to look at why those courses were active, the IT manager has identified key people around the organisation that can help support that change movement. But he took the next step, which most of us don't do. He took the next step to connect with them personally, to make time for them and actually listen to their views. And that's something we don't see happening a lot in an institutionalized process. We see a lot of committees, especially from a tertiary background. We see a lot of committees organised to manage these kind of processes, and that's all well and good. I'm not saying we shouldn't have those structures, but I am saying these informal structures can often give us the opportunity to voice opinions that otherwise don't get heard, especially when it's in a smaller setting. Folks, I've pretty much finished my little homily now. I'm keen to talk more about learning and about this in general. So I've touched on some of the reports that you can use to help inform who you choose to talk to across your organisation and why you would choose to talk to them. But I've also talked about the soft human skills you need to be able to make effective use of that information, because you need both to use it well. I know we're only a small group this evening, and I'm really grateful to all of you for turning up at this late or early hour, as the case may be. If you've got comments or questions, I'd love to hear them. Oh, I do like that quote. That's a good one. I've searched all the parks in all the cities and found no statues of committees. Gilbert K. Chesterton. I shall have to look that up a little bit further. Don't get me wrong, committees certainly have their place, but we seem to turn to them very quickly. Kathleen's got a thought. So do I. I think too often we connect very readily with the high achievers and the exemplars, but we often don't want to talk about the low usage courses. Regular meetings is a really must have, and it doesn't have to be a monthly cup of coffee. I've seen, sorry, I'll take a back step for a moment. My partner is a PHP programmer, and we worked together at an institution for quite a while. Not very closely together, but together nonetheless. And this organisation was spread across probably a 1.5k campus, so there's a fair bit of walking to get around to all the teaching staff. To his credit, he made a point of just going wandering most lunchtimes and occasionally just for sections of the day, and connecting with those users who were sitting quietly in offices screaming at their monitors because Moodle wasn't working. You know, by making sure he was available to see what was happening at the coalface, he established some very good and very solid relationships with people who were later able to come to him and go, look, I'm trying to do this, or my students are reporting this issue, which kept him informed of what was happening at both the ground level and the system level. At the system level, he was working with the programmers, so he could see what was happening in the code very quickly. It was that human touch that really made him quite successful across the organisation. Or at least that's our take on it. When you say spread across the province, Kathleen, I've momentarily assumed that you mean spread across a physical campus, but that could also be interpreted to mean spread across lots of different physical locations. And we've got an RTO at the moment who's a nationwide RTO with campuses spread across various organisations. Yep, there you go, 13 sites. I think they've got a few less than that, but they've still got the same problem. Yes, it can, Anna. Participation can differ from year to year, certainly, but it can be an indication of how well that course is going. And that's, I'm kind of emphasising an indication because I would hate to see a teacher castigated over just a different cohort's approach to that particular course. And I've got a colleague who taught the same course, I think, 2 years in a row. And the first year's uptake was fantastic. They waxed lyrical about it. Didn't change the course for the second year, and yet the second cohort coming through just really didn't resonate with it. Exactly. It's not always down to the teacher. There's dynamics at play with the different students we have coming through. And any teacher knows that. What can be useful is being able to have that kind of statistical data there to help inform their practices. Now, I'm not saying that should result in a change in their practices. It can simply be this is an interesting comparison between what happened this year and what happened last year. Relationships are certainly key, but they're a little hard for us to show back to executive management. Being able to combine that soft relationship data and the statistical data can really be helpful. So I'm just reading Cheryl's comment. I think what I love about this is that peer mentoring element. So we've got both the slower courses and the high courses meeting each other and being able to have those peers mentor each other. Both of them have got different things to offer. It may be that our lower activity courses are actually doing fantastically well. There's no need for students to go looking and clicking in multiple areas to find things because it's really well laid out. They can see it intuitively. It may be that our high-end courses are actually being too busy because there's too many places to click and not enough organisational structure there for students to find what they're actually looking for. So again, it's how we interpret the data. Yeah, I think mentoring each other is really key to this. And being able to find them so that they mentor each other well. And there's actually research being done that demonstrates the closer peers are, the easier the mentorship relationship is. Um, we find it easier to be mentored by someone who's just a step or two above us, because that person who's a real expert can be quite daunting to approach. Time? No, we've got plenty of time. There we go. So what I might do is just draw to your attention I'm going to switch formats for a moment, folks, so don't be disconcerted. Moving to the Q&A section. Oh, nuts. Moving to the presenting section, sorry. You'll find in the Files pod there's a PDF document called Finding the Leaders and the Lost. This is the presentation that I did last week in Bhutan at the International Society for Teacher Education conference. It's a very unique conference. Each presenter is asked to write a paper and submit it for peer review and kind of collegial paper building across a week. And it was certainly a very good experience, but the reason I bring it up here, this presentation is based on that paper. So if you're interested in references or a little more detail on what we've discussed here, you're more than welcome to have a read of that paper. It is very much a draft research project, which is exactly how it was presented at ITSTI. What we're looking for, or what I'm looking for, is people interested in trying to find some more useful data to build up the research around. And at the moment from that conference, I've got 2 folks interested in doing a case study. I would love to see some people from iMoot interested in doing it as well. So if yourselves or someone you know is interested, please get them in touch with me. I think it would be highly beneficial to be able to get some hard data on this to present to executives or management staff working with Moodle sites. All of us are looking for what constitutes best practice, so some good hard evidence would be wonderful. Hopefully it sparked some interest, JF Dragon. So how many of you would be going back to your Moodle sites and looking for these reports? A show of hands, maybe? Oh, fantastic. Oh, great stuff, Stefan. Glad to hear it. Do you remember? That's lovely. Do you remember to turn on statistics if you're looking at reports in any of your sites? No, thank you very much for attending, JF. And the rest of you. I really appreciate that it's late in iMoot and some of you have been staying up all hours to see these wonderful presentations. So thank you very much for joining me for this one. That's pretty much all I've got presentation-wise, but I'm happy to hang around and talk with those of you who want to stay a bit longer.
And jumping in, just say thank you, Lindy, for sharing with us all, and thank you everyone for actually joining in as well. Very much appreciated having everyone here. Enjoy the rest of iMoot. I was just counting, there's only 10 sessions left.
Oh,
Kind of
goodness.
almost sad now.
All right, Shane, I'm happy to hang around for as long as people want to join me. I know you need to go and wrap up other sessions.